I was in Canada the other day and somebody called me a spiritual steamroller. I'm like, what does that mean exactly? It doesn't sound positive, does it? Actually, last night, Bob Sima, a very dear friend of mine, an amazing, incredible musician, singer, New Thought musician. I just spent the last couple days with him. I believe his description was that I was like a golf cart hooked to a 747. I was like, I understand the 747, but where's the golf cart play into that? I don't know if I like that or not. But and I think it's just because I'm willing to be real and direct. I don't mince my words. Now, there's some people that can say I don't mince my words, and that's their way of just tearing you down with a lot of sarcasm and things. I don't mean that with myself. Sarcasm is an interesting word, actually. The Latin root, I'm a language guy, the Latin root is sarx, which means to cut, rip, or tear flesh. So I've actually heard spiritual teachers say, I'm so happy I still have my sarcasm because I can let this stuff out. And it's like, yeah, but where are you letting it out? And who are you letting it out onto? Think about that. What I'm going to talk about today is going to be along those lines of what our relations are with others and where we're coming from in those. What I'm going to begin with, though, is some Aramaic toning. And normally I do the Lord's Prayer, but today what we're going to do is we're going to tone one word 3 times, and I think I have it. There it is. Nuhra. There's an H in the middle, which is kind of weird in English. Nuhra, nuhra. The sound that we're going to tone is simply nura, okay? Nu, N-O-O, not quite new, but nura, okay? We're going to do this sound 3 times, okay? Nura, 3 times. Put everything you have into this third one. Really let it ring out, okay? Let's do just one more, a fourth, silently, under your breath. In other words, you're not going to make a sound at all. You know how Nura feels now. You know the way that vibration moves through your system. So just in your own time and place, do one within yourself, silently. Just feel it. How does that feel? You can open your eyes. Anybody feel really antsy and like you want to jump through the window right now, or is it something else? It's something else. This is the primary word in Aramaic for a specific kind of light. This is human light, the light of humanity. Yeshua made statements like, Ninhar Norkun Kedembre Nasha, let your light shine before humanity. That Norkun is a form of this word. Kun means yours. Norkun. The Ra sound at the end, which is right here in the Aramaic, here in the English, obviously going in 2 different directions. That Ra sound, has anybody ever heard Ra before? Ra. Sun. Where's that come from? What language? Egyptian, Coptic. And Aramaic borrowed this sound Ra from Coptic. Ra, shining forth of heat and light. Also Horus, the sun god, one of the sun gods, the only begotten, who was about a couple thousand years before Yeshua, who was, of course, born on December 25th. and had disciples and healed the sick, walked on water, raised the dead, was dead for 3 days, arose on the third day. Why does that sound familiar? There's a lot actually more to that, and then I can get into Mithra and Attis, and that's not why I'm here necessarily, at least not this time. You can look on YouTube. I've got videos about all that kind of stuff. I've been talking about that for over a decade now. But that sound, that shining forth of heat and light, Nuhra, specifically this sound Nuhra, is a feminine light. This is the light of humanity, not necessarily a masculine light, a light that's shining at me. The actual light for the word for the light of the sun is Shemshah. Shemshah. Actually, I have a friend who's an incredible musician named Shimshai, who's got his name from the sun of Aramaic. And the word for the actual moon itself, Sahara. Interesting. Have you heard that word before? Kind of seems like it should be the sun, though, right? Seems kind of Sahara, a hot place. What's unique about this here is the light of the moon, okay, in Aramaic. It's a feminine light. What does that mean? What's unique about the light of the moon versus the light of the sun? It's reflecting, but it's still the light of the sun. The light of human consciousness is still the light of God, but it's a reflection back. Alan Watts said that we are the universe peering back into the universe from billions of points of view. We become so obsessed about all the different points, we forget that they're really fractal refractions of one prismatic light. One light that's actually whole, and there's these prismatic, let me think. Look at that. See that? Focus on one little dot, if you can, from where you are. One little pinpoint of awareness. Now, how many lights am I actually holding? There's one source of light there. There's one laser. But there's a little prism on the end that refracts that. And ooh, look at that. You see that? Looks like almost chaos. And then look, it comes back together. And then it goes back out again. Seems to look like chaos, but everything has a very specific time and place and movement. And then it comes back together. And then it goes again, and then it comes back together, and then it really comes back together. What's the only part of the moon that the sun chooses not to shine on? Ooh, no answers. I've been here before. Yeah, the dark side. It's a trick question. Because first of all, because I said chooses. What's the only part of the moon that the sun can't shine on? The part that's turned away. Most spiritual philosophies are going to, especially the ones in the last 20 years, the ones that sell a lot of books, bless their little hearts, are going to tell you, don't look at what's on the other side of the moon. Don't look at the dark side. Just say that you're the light. And don't look at that. But the question that I asked was, what's the only part of the moon that the sun chooses not to shine on? There is no such thing, because all the sun can do is shine. The sun is equivalent to the light of God. The moon is the human light that's reflecting back. Now, I don't want to get into duality, does it exist and all that. I have actually a great little analogy for duality. People that tell me, well, you know how you sort of meet people that read sort of stuff and they get this fluffy personality? And it's like, well, duality doesn't really exist. So it's like, okay, let's try something. Don't eat for 6 months. Actually, I know there's breatharians. All right, let's try something else. Is this 9th right here? Go out there and lay in the middle. Actually, not even. Go sort of in the middle of downtown, right at the intersection of Patrick and what's the other? And Market. And just lay there for a couple hours and let's see if duality doesn't exist. Okay? That's what I mean when I'm talking about, that raw honesty, that I'm being as 100% completely open as I can. And there's sort of an analogy I've given in this room before, which is this. Let's imagine that you have never seen light before, okay? And you've always existed within a box that I say is darkness, but you've never seen light, so darkness doesn't actually exist in truth. It's life. And you can have a thought, which you don't realize is a thought, like, okay, I want to feel something. And then you feel something here, and you don't know how that's happening. Remember, you've never seen anything. You don't realize yet that you have a hand. It's amazing how in the Gospel of John, where we're told that it says nothing existed, all things that existed came through his hand. And that word hand in Aramaic is be'ada, which actually means something that is an extension of itself. What that line actually meant was that everything that's created is still God, that there's nothing outside of God. Everything came from God, to God, into God, as God. There's nothing outside of God. Now, let's say you've been in this box for 40 years, and one moment in time, the tiniest pinpoint of light was coming, just kind of leaking into the box. I don't think creeping is the right word. That's just peeking into that box, and it's like, how are you going to feel about that? You've never seen light before, but it's very faint. It's very faint, very feminine. How would you feel about that? You'd probably be intrigued, wouldn't you? What would you probably want to do? Get some more. You'd be kind of like, ooh, there's a box here, and you'd be trying to like pry that open to get a little bit more light in. You know, there's some phrases that Yeshua said. The most common question asked I get. Okay, the most common question asked I get. Now I'm talking like in Aramaic, like dog, black, and things. The most common question I get asked is, what was Yeshua saying when he said all those I am phrases? And I've talked about it here before, but just very quickly, if he was talking about I am, when he says I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world, I am the gate, he would say, Ina, like as an example, bread of life, Ina lakma dahai, I Yeshua am the bread of life. Ina means I. But he didn't say one Ina, he actually said Ina. He didn't say I, Jesus, am the bread of life. He said I is the bread of life. And take a breath and let this in. I've said this here before. From St. Francis of Assisi, what you are looking for is what is looking. What you are looking for is what is looking. What you're seeking, love, presence, peace, beauty, power, poise, is actually the consciousness that is seeking through you. That is the bread of life. Those moments when you're holding a baby in the first 20 minutes of life, that living, breathing being, or those moments when you're just driving down the road and you've got the right music and the windows are down and it's a spring morning and everything just lines up. That's the bread of life, and that's the portal. That word, that tareya, inana tareya, I am the gate. The I within the I is the gate. That word gate means portal or doorway. And he actually says in that when one discovers this portal, you will go into the portal and come out of the portal and discover the pasture, it says in this book right here. That word pasture in Aramaic means the fertile field. Now just think about that, fertile field. Not just grass on the ground, but a field that is fertile, that is alive, that is awake, that is conscious. Anybody ever seen The Matrix? I'm not going to go too deep into that right now, although it's a cool subject. But now let's look at that box a little differently, though. Let's say that you've been in a box for 40 years, you've never seen light, you've only been in an experience of darkness. How many years did Moses and the Israelites wander in the desert? 40 years. How long was Yeshua in the desert? 40 days. It's just a coincidence, I'm sure. But let's say that you're in this box, you've never seen light, and all of a sudden the blazing Key West, the front end of the box gets ripped off, and it's the blazing Key West, Florida sun. How would you feel about that? Never having seen light, never been cultured to light, never been seasoned to light, and it just flies in your face. Scream. What would you call it, possibly? It's the fire of hell. I'll get to this book in a second. It's the fire of hell. Think about that. Now, in the Aramaic philosophies, the light of God is equivalent to the light of the sun. Human light is that moonlight, that reflective feminine light, okay? What happens when you move close to the sun? The closer you get to the sun, you burn. Why? Everybody breathing? Why? It's hot. There's a little bit more of a conscious answer. What's that? There's some part of you that is not the same as that light. Or there's a belief in you that believes that part of you is not the same as that light. The only thing that can come into the presence of the fire of the sun is the fire of the sun. The only thing that can come into the presence of the light of God is the light of God. Anything you're holding on to, the closer you get to that light when you move through that portal, it will burn in proportion to your resistance of that light. The very thing that you're asking for is the very thing that you're trying to push away. Look at the way the world's been over the last couple of years. People can look at it like everything's falling apart and everything's burning in an eternal hellfire. I'm not going to go in my Southern Baptist preacher thing now, but I might in a couple of minutes. We'll see. Or you can look at what's falling apart. One of the things that I say is you can look at the soil that's being displaced, or you can see that beautiful flower that's beginning to emerge. There's a choice there. So I've got a great book that I've read this before in a few talks, but it's been a while. It's called Church Signs Across America. It's just got some cool stuff in it. I've got a church at the bottom of the mountain I live at in Nashville, North Carolina, that's called God's Filling Station, which I thought was an interesting name. I remember a few years ago in Tennessee, I said it was God's waiting room, and then I'm like, wait, that's not it, that's Florida. But did I say that? I lived there for 10 years. I just want to read you a few of these signs. They're pretty cool. Exposure to the sun, S-O-N, may prevent burning. Fundamentalism. I love how they call it fundamentalism because it actually misses the fundamentals completely. Looking for a lifeguard, ours walks on water. That's pretty good. Stop, drop, and roll won't work in hell. I think this one's actually my favorite. Eternity. Smoking or non-smoking? Oh, that's good stuff. Then I go to the back here. The absolute last one that they chose, it says, again, love one another. I want to read something to you. This is from a magazine called Islamica. Islamica was probably, in my opinion, as a periodical magazine, the most important magazine that has been published in the last 20 years. But it went out of business about, it's been 7 or 8 years. I bought one issue and then it went out of business. And then they sort of tried to come back and it didn't quite happen. But what they did was they ended up posting all of their articles online. And you can Google Islamica magazine and you'll find them. This particular article, and this was the first thing I read in this magazine, it's called The Lost Jihad, Love in Islam. It says that the heart of all things is the germ of their overthrow, wrote Egyptian author Adaf Suif in her Booker-nominated novel, The Map of Love. She was indulging in a very beautifully written digression about Arabic grammar, comparing words derived from the same root, in this case, kalb, heart, and enkilab, overthrow. They both have that kalb root. This is in Arabic. At this level, where the interplay of meaning and construction is visible, Arabic becomes an extraordinary language, forcing into cooperation concepts and ideas that are unrelated in English. Aramaic, the language of Jesus, is the same thing. Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic are 3 shades of one single state of being. Judaism, Hebrew roots. Aramaic is the tree that bears the fruit, that goes out and bears that fruit. And Islam, true Islam, is that fruit that falls in absolute ripeness and submission back down to the roots to regenerate. And it's one single tree. And if I gave you 3 choices of the 3 most intentionally fighting factions on our planet, which 3 would they be? Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And they're all 3 parts of one Abrahamic tree. Now I want to read a little more here. It says, I don't usually read quotes this long because I feel like the energy dips, but this is so important that I'm going to, and you're going to like it. Despite the tremendous conceptual range and utility, okay, I'll get out of those words, provided by the root and pattern system of the language, there is a common assumption among non-speakers that Arabic and thus Islam lacks an equivalent of agape, a Greek term used by Christians to mean boundaryless, self-sacrificing love between believers or between a believer and God. More passionate than philia, less explicit than eros, agape is a love stripped of expectation, in which the lover is humbled and disciplined before the beloved. Running a Google search for agape in Islam yields literally hundreds of Christian sites, claiming there is no such term in Arabic and painting Islam as a cold, dispassionate religion in its absence. I was getting my hair cut once. It's been a while, this story. I actually was cutting my hair in the beginning of doing this publicly because the Jesus references were so great. But he wouldn't have looked anything like me, or Jim Caviezel, or any of the people that have played him, Willem Dafoe, Christian Bale. He, in truth, would have looked like Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein blended in with maybe some James Earl Jones, maybe a little Nelson Mandela. Wouldn't have looked anything like me. Nothing. But I was talking with the girl who was cutting my hair, and she asked me what I did. And I don't really usually answer that question. I just kind of get in the question and get out, because I have no need to. Usually because if I'm with other people, they'll be like, tell them what you do. We'll run into a minister or a priest or something, and I'm like, I'm not opening that can of worms here, okay? I don't need to talk about it. But I started asking her, and she's like, somehow we got on the subject of Islam. She's like, oh, I'm reading the Quran right now. And I went, oh, really? She was a real nice, pleasant girl. I was like, that's really cool. And I started talking about some little things in the Quran. The Quran, that mean, evil book with all of that horrible kill the infidel and all of that horrible violence. This book that I've read, I don't know how many times at this point and studied. It sure sounds like the Hebrew Bible to me. It sounds like the Old Testament or large portions of the New Testament. So easy to point out there. But I started talking with her, and I started getting this weird vibe. Something was off. And I'm like, I was asking her questions. I was trying to have a discussion, but there was just this weird ick in the conversation. And then I looked over by her, all of her curlers and curling irons and all that stuff, and I saw a book there, and I was like, is that what you're reading? She's like, yeah, that's it. I was like, you're not actually reading the Quran. She's like, no, this is a book I got at the, I don't remember which Christian bookstore, and it's about the Quran. And I literally first I looked at the table of contents and I flipped through. It was literally spin-doctored propaganda, and it was full of lies, and she got it at a Christian bookstore. And my heart sank. And it was, the hair's up on my arm, because it was just one of those defining moments for me in why I'm doing what I'm doing. And she had just all of these just distorted, horrifying ideas about what's in that book. And I realized that it's not going to help anything for me to just turn away and not talk about it. But yet, if I talk about it with heavy criticism or judgment of her, again, I'm still doing nothing. What I actually have to be able to do is be 100% fully conscious and present with what my actions and my words are, and literally to be able to step into the fire, because that's what it is. It's a fire. It's a pretty intense fire between these three different religions. I'm going to read the rest of that quote from this article. They're speaking of the Arabic word mohaba. Now, mohaba, they say that it's a completely Arabic word that did not have any origins in any other language, but unfortunately, mohaba is it comes right out of Aramaic. And I'm actually surprised that the person who wrote this didn't know that, but mohaba differs from agape in one crucial respect, because serving and approaching the beloved is a form of ongoing personal struggle. Mohaba is a form of jihad. A far cry from the violent and indiscriminate small jihad preached by militants. Mohaba is a form of al-jihad or al-kabir, the greater jihad, or jihad against one's own ego. There's a word in Aramaic, and it's the sister word of jihad. You know what that word is? Satana. Sound familiar? Inner spiritual turmoil, a being divided against itself, not an external boo, somebody hiding behind the curtains or lurking in dark corners. That all came later, had a lot to do with this book here in the 13th century. The Divine Play, Dante's Inferno, the Passion Play. It's an interesting read. I've got I don't know how many versions and translations of this. One was actually one of the, who was it? Oh, Wordsworth. Henry Wordsworth Longfellow actually did a translation of this, which when I first found that out, I'm like, really? That's kind of weird. Let me finish this before I move on a little bit. It is perhaps unsurprising that in an age of lesser jihad, muhaba has fallen out of practice and almost out of memory. It is so universally neglected that when Islam is accused of lacking a concept of divine brotherhood, few Muslims have the intellectual wherewithal to protest. But Adaf Suif, who is that person, that the woman I quoted in the beginning, is right. At the heart of all things is the germ of their overthrow. The struggle to serve God out of love and one another out of love is the jihad of human potential against the jihad of violent ideology. If resurrected, it has the power to change the world. In the Aramaic Syriac Gospel of Mary Magdalene, Gospel according to Mary Magdalene, she talks about 7 energy centers. She spoke of, it's an interesting document because large portions are missing. And it's like, it'll just ramp it up, and then, oh, that part's missing. And then it'll just crank it, and you're like, oh, on the edge of your seat, and oh, that part's missing. But she had an interesting thing to say. She talked about a secret teaching that she got from Yeshua. And just really quickly, if you look at all the historical evidence that we have, who do you think were Yeshua's 2 closest companions? Mary and Judas. Judas, who betrayed Yeshua with a kiss. That word betray in Aramaic and Greek means to fulfill a complete circle. Now, if someone was going to turn you over to the authorities for you to be crucified, who would you want it to be? The one that you love the most, the one that you can trust. He betrayed him with a kiss. I know it makes great art to say he betrayed him. He turned him over with a kiss, and then what did he do after that? He hung himself. Does that sound like a bad guy to you? It's great in the movies because you see the dark thing go and like come up behind him and go inside of his body. I know that's real Hollywood and it's cool and all, but not very accurate. Mary talked about these 7 powers, though, and I'm going to read it from what I've got here. She says, the soul overcame the 3rd power. It went upwards and saw the 4th power, which took 7 forms. The first form is darkness, the root chakra, not closed down, not open. The second is desire, the sex center. The third is ignorance, not following your gut. The 4th is the exhilaration of death. What's beating out of your chest when you face something that is pretty intense, including coming closer to the light of God or facing death in your face. What's beating out of your chest? The 5th is the kingdom of the flesh. Remember in the beginning I talked about sarcasm. Where does that come from? It comes through your voice. Does anybody know what the first organ of the body is that forms in the fetus, as the fetus? It's the heart. Does anybody know what the second organ is that comes out of the heart? It's the tongue. Think about that. The 6th is the foolish wisdom of the flesh. Right here, the 3rd eye closed down. And the 7th is hostility and wrathful wisdom. the crown shut down, where all the energy regurgitates back into the body, and there's no opening for others. It's this system that is locked down, putting everything back into itself. But I'm going to pull this together by, bring it to a close by just giving you a couple of insights here. The very thing that you're asking for, the very light that you ask for, when it shows up, you scream and yell and you say, though, everything is falling apart. The only reason it seems to be falling apart is because you're resisting that light doing what it needs to do. That's what this afternoon is about. I have, my son Mikey is downstairs right now. And Mikey is a feeler. And he is a feeler of epic proportions. And there's an interesting thing that happened with him a few years ago. He is no longer in public school. He attends the Light of Wisdom School at the Center for Spiritual Living in Asheville, North Carolina, where I am a member. And he's been there for a couple of years. He has this interesting thing that happens when he starts to feel sad or angry. He gets scared, especially of anger. He's terrified of his anger. And he goes through this. That quote is, "At the heart of all things is the germ of their overthrow." He goes into this absolute chaotic experience where he's hostility and rage and anger, and then he starts to judge it as being bad, and he gets scared of it, and then he starts crying. He had this experience in public school, it's been about 4 years now, where he was a little overwhelmed with something, and the teacher was putting him on the spot in a lot of ways, and Mikey started crying. And the teacher, who she was just about to retire after decades, and she brings him up to the front of the room, and she's like, "Okay, Mike, stand in the front of the room." And he was still crying. And she looked at the kids out in the classroom, and she said, "I want all of you to laugh at him." We're still working on that one. Mikey is this amazing, beautiful being, and when he has those moments, instead of me proselytizing and there's a little bit of a trust issue there with anybody that talks at Mike. You know what I do? If he's got something going on, I just sit next to him and I just lean on him and I breathe. It's amazing what something that simple can do, to just get close to whatever it is that's bringing your stuff up and just sit with it and breathe. Because if I am upset with what's going on in him, that means there's something inside of me that I need to let go of too. And what happens is, when Mikey gets into those moments of absolute panic, what's beating out of his chest? His heart. What happens for you if you're a parent and your child gets hurt and they go launching off my little girl Shemaiah, it's the word heaven in Aramaic, she's got this, I've got a video that I'm going to be putting on YouTube where she's just like dancing on the coffee table, which is, she'll even stand on the kitchen table, which is like kind of a tall table, and she'll go, da, da, la. I mean, literally, it's just amazing to see. I mean, then she'll go, and I'm like, yeah, the heart's like, brrr. What I'm saying is this. The very thing that you asked for is here, and it's happening. The awakening is happening. How do I know? Because we're talking about it, and because we can feel it, and because you're in the room. Step into it. Step into it. Be conscious. Breathe. What happens is, as you do that, your heart opens. And there's one thing that Pope Benedict, where was that? A couple weeks ago, and I said Benedict Arnold, and I was like, oh, wait, no. I was in Georgia, and I didn't notice it at first, and someone said, Benedict Arnold, and I'm like, oh, geez, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I meant Pope Benedict. He said, actually, he said something in September that when I first heard it, I thought, well, of course he knows that word because it's one of the few Aramaic words that were left in the Bible. And then I was talking about it again in Myrtle Beach at Margaret Hiller's church, and it was right before Christmas, and I said it again. I said, Pope Benedict said something back in September, and he said that the entire Christian philosophy distills down to one Aramaic word, and that's the Aramaic word itfatah, which means be open. It's what Yeshua said to the deaf, dumb, and blind man when he healed him. He said, be open. And it was like when I was saying it in Myrtle Beach, I almost started bawling because I realized the magnanimity of him making a statement like that. And it's funny, there's all these sort of conspiracy theories about why he's leaving. I'm not getting into that field. But But to me, that's a sign of hope. Sometimes some systems are so messed up they just need to fall, but that's all I'm going to say about that. But maybe there's still some hope there. And what I'm going to just say now is just this afternoon I did this last year, the Aramaic Healing Circle. We'll be doing that, and all it is it's an opportunity for you to just let go. It's an opportunity for you to be exactly who you are, exactly as you are. If you've got something inside of you that you can't get rid of, it's because you're not letting go. If you try to resist something, what happens? Yeah, and it pushes you back. And you're asking like, okay, I want to let go of this. Well, then stop talking about it. Just let go. Just drop it. As Ron Roth said, just drop it and let the angels pick up the mess. Pick up the garbage, I think were his exact words. But so I invite you to be at the Aramaic Healing Circle. And we work with anointing and water in their original Egyptian understanding rather than the way Christianity stole it and warped it a little bit. I just want to thank you for being open, because the energy in this room, I told Tony right before the talk, my talk kept sort of charging itself and getting more and more strong as the time got closer. And it's something that happens for me intuitively when a place is very open. So I thank you for your time, and I'd love to see you this afternoon.